Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome if you are new. My name is Kai and without further ado, let's go ahead and get straight into today's video. So today we are going to be doing one of our last summer sets. And in my last video, I mentioned that I probably had a few more nail sets to do before the end of the season. So this is one of those nail sets. For today, I really want to keep it nice and simple. We're just going to be doing a really cute and I guess kind of beginner friendly nail set, at least more beginner friendly than my last one. So let's go ahead and get straight into it. So the first thing that I like to do, as always, is just get out my implements and go ahead and get them nice and sanitized. I always mention this, but I always like to fully sterilize my nail tools using barbicide just to make sure that all of the bacteria is completely off of the surface of these tools. Alcohol is not going to be your end all be all. You definitely have to make sure to sterilize your tools beforehand because alcohol is not sufficient in getting rid of bacterial spores and things like that. Even still, I like to do this just to make sure that everything is as sanitized as I can get it before I go ahead and use these on my nails. Now, once that's done, we're going to go ahead and push back these cuticles using a cuticle remover. This is something that I have been incorporating into my nail prep for the last couple of months because personally, my cuticles are pretty stubborn, and as someone who's trying to focus on nail health, I don't really enjoy using cuticle bits on my natural nails as much anymore. So this is a really great step for just softening the skin and making sure that everything is easily removable, and it also makes removing the 𝘊𝘠𝘵𝘰𝘵𝘰𝘯 or the proximal nail fold just a little bit easier. I'm going to go ahead and go in with my cuticle nippers and just cut back the excess skin. Once again, the cuticle remover definitely makes this process a little bit easier for me. Even still, I do want to mention that this is not a necessary step in your nail prep. You definitely do not have to touch the 𝘊𝘠𝘰𝘮 at all. This is definitely a cosmetic procedure. If you do choose to do so, make sure that you are only cutting the skin that is white, crusty, or ready to come off. You don't want to start going too far and causing inflammation and redness because not only is that very painful and not too great to look at, but it can also lead to cuticle infections and skin problems, so we definitely want to avoid that at all costs. So now that our cuticles are nice and set, we are going to go ahead and just fix up the edges of these nails a little bit. My nails are still pretty short from cutting them last time, so I'm really just going to be making sure that they're all nice and even. And once that was all done, I did go in with 2 coats of my Macart Peel It Off base coat. So our nails are nice and prepped, and now we're going to go ahead and size out these nail tips. We're not going to be doing long nails, so I'm not going to pull out my XXL nail tips for today. But anyways, when I'm sizing out my nail tips, I always like to make sure that they fit sidewall to sidewall and that it fits nice and comfortably. Now for me, because I am doing a pop-off nail set, I am going to be curing on these nail tips with a little bit of base coat, and to help me get these on, I'm going to be using my UV flashlight. If you are doing these nail tips to last, I definitely recommend using, of course, some regular nail glue instead. But again, I want these nails to come off directly after I'm done, so base coat definitely does the trick for me. Now when I am curing on these nail tips, I like to apply the base coat directly into the well of the nail tip rather than on top of my nail. This just helps to prevent the possibility of the gel flooding onto the skin, which we definitely do not want. And also, it's important to mention that when I am using a nail tip with a well, you want to make sure to apply the entirety of the well over the nail. You don't want any portion of the well sticking off of the nail tip, especially considering that the well of the nail tips is specifically designed to be a little bit thinner and not as strong, and we really don't want that to compromise the overall strength of these nails. And now that these are nice and cured on, I'm going to go in with my tip cutters and just cut them down to my desired length. And because we're going to shape these later, we're going to go ahead and jump straight into the acrylic application. So for today, I am going back to one of my favorite colors ever, which is Rose Petal from 𝘊𝘰𝘵𝘵𝘰𝘯. This is the same jar that I've been using for at least 6 months at this point, and I am so happy that I made this purchase because I love the color, I love the overall consistency of the product, and it's lasted me so long. So I just love this color, and I noticed that in the reference photo, the nude was a little bit more neutral and not as pink per se. And I don't know if you guys know this, but I have maybe like 3 different nude colors because I really don't like to stray too far from what I know, at least not yet. But anyway, this one was the most neutral one that I had, so I ended up using it for today. Speaking of, I did pair this acrylic powder with my Valentino monomer, and I will say that I definitely needed to just wait and see how I like this monomer because the first time I used it, I did not like it. But this time around, it definitely wasn't too bad. But anyways, yes, we are doing this application, and as most of you guys know, I like to follow roughly the 3 to 4 bead method, but sometimes I do add more beads here and there if I feel like I need to. Definitely do not be afraid to add more or less beads if you feel like your structure is where it needs to be. Especially as beginners, you can sometimes kind of psych yourself up and feel very discouraged because you might need more beads than someone else might need, but that is completely okay. The entire point of this process is to make sure that your structure is where it needs to be. It doesn't matter how long it takes, it doesn't matter how many beads you need, as long as you are setting a good foundation, that is all that matters. But anyways, yeah, I'm not going to talk too much during this portion. I'm going to go ahead and let you guys watch the rest of this application, and of course, we'll be back to shape and file these nails. so my application is done and here's what these nails are looking like. So the first thing that we're going to do to kick off the shaping process is just go in with my 80/80 grit nail file, and I'm going to be using this nail file to shape the sidewalls, the undersides, the free edge, and the main bulk of this nail. Now because my shape is pretty much still intact because my application was pretty smooth, I really don't have too much to file during this process, and with that being said, I am making sure not to go too crazy and start really filing into the sidewalls and the undersides of the nails, especially considering that it's not necessary and also that can lead to potential damage, which we don't want, of course. A couple of videos ago, I did make a video explaining a little bit more in depth about my shaping process, so if that is something you'd like to see, I will make sure to put it in the cards above. But for the most part, I pretty much do the same thing. I always shape the sidewalls first, go ahead and shape the undersides, then I shape the main portion of the nail, and for this part, I really only like to focus on the area that is above the apex. The apex is usually an area that I like to skip during this process because that is something I'm going to be filing later with my carbide bit, so it won't be necessary at this very moment. And once the main body of the nail is done, I go ahead and move on to the free edge. I usually like to hold my nail file at a slightly upwards angle just to give me that subtle moon crescent shape. I haven't really been too much of a huge fan of the moon crescent shape for quite some time now. I haven't done it in a very long time, and now I'm kind of opting for a more subtle effect, not super curved. So yeah, I just hold my nail file at a very, very slightly upwards angle. So now that the main portion of the nail is filed, I'm going to go in with this carbide bit here, and I will make sure to link it below in case you are wondering exactly what bit this is. And just to be clear, not an affiliate link, not sponsored, not partnered. This is just so that it can be easier for you guys to find. But anyways, yeah, I use this bit all the time and it does a really good job at sealing my cuticle and making things look a little bit more natural. And it also does a pretty nice job of just buffing over the surface and getting rid of those scratches. But of course, you can always use a sanding band or even a nail file if that's something you feel more comfortable with. Definitely go with whatever works best for you. So we are now onto the nail art process, and this is the nail set that we're going to be doing today. I really like this nail set because I just feel like it's a lot more simple than something I usually do, at least for me personally. I feel like my idea of simple is kind of tailored a lot to what I usually do, even though for some people it may actually be a little bit more complex. But anyways, the first thing that I went ahead and did is just mixed out all of my colors and just got them ready on my nail palette. Now before we get into anything, the first thing I'm going to do is just cleanse my nails with a little bit of alcohol. Now, the first thing to do is to get some of these base colors onto the nail, and for my pointer finger, I am going to be painting the entirety of this nail using that light yellow color. And for my ring finger and my thumbnail, I'm going to be using this light green to create a nice French tip. Now, I should mention here that I am going to be doing these in 2 layers, so I'm making sure that these layers are relatively thin. In my last video, I did some pretty thick layers. I think it was just because I was rushing, to be honest. I really was running out of time. It was getting pretty late, but I realized that it didn't really cure properly and I was getting some warping, I guess, if that's what you want to call it, or I guess wrinkling is a better word. So make sure that these layers are pretty thin in order to prevent that. It's a lot better to go in with 2 or 3 layers that are pretty thin than to go in with 1 thick layer, because sometimes your lamp is not going to cure properly. I do want to mention that while I'm on the pointer finger, because we're going to be doing an outlined nail, I'm not going all the way to the edges because it's going to be covered up anyways and you're not going to see it. And also that's going to help to maintain the shape just a little bit better, considering that I don't have 4 to 5 layers around the entirety of the nail. So that is something to keep in mind. Now we're going to be working on the flower on this middle finger, and for that I'm going to be using some solid nail glue gel from Macart. I haven't picked up this product in a very long time because it's kind of annoying. It's very sticky and hard to work with, but I wanted the yellow to be exactly the same, so I knew I was going to have to paint it anyway, so I didn't want to waste my colored ones when I was just going to cover it anyway. Now this is one of my more simple flowers. I usually do very frilly and I guess more delicate looking flowers, but this one's fairly simple and beginner friendly. I'm going to be taking a small ball of this solid nail glue gel and I'm going to flatten it down using my sculpting tools into a cute little teardrop shape, and that's really it. It's not super intricate or anything like that, so I'm not focusing on making it super perfect here. And once that flower is done, I'm going to, of course, paint the entire surface with the same yellow that I used on my pointer finger. And now we're going to get into probably the most stressful part of this nail set, and that is the airbrushing. For this airbrushing process, I'm only going to be using 2 different colors, and of course, that's going to be pink and blue. Now the pink was fairly simple, everything was going pretty okay, and while I am here, I do want to mention that the airbrushing for the pink on the pointer finger should not be super intense and shouldn't cover the entirety of the nail. Do bear in mind that we are still going to be outlining this nail and we want the yellow to still be able to be seen. great until I moved on to the French tip nails, which was a little bit more difficult, but the airbrushing was supposed to be specifically isolated towards the French tip area, so I had to go in with my cleanup brush and just make sure that things were nice and neat, but for the most part it wasn't too bad here. Now, the more difficult part was the blue, specifically on my pointer finger. You're really going to have to be extremely calculated as to where you're pointing the airbrush tool, because it's very easy for it to not be centered and for it to be pretty much covering up the entirety of the pink surface. So take your time, make sure that the airbrush is pretty close and that you're being very gentle with the trigger. You don't want to pull it back too far, because I had to start over like 4 or 5 times. It was just a lot, even to the point where I had to redo it. So definitely take your time and just make sure that the colors are still being seen and that they're separated and not too muddled together. And again, make sure that the airbrushing isn't too wide on the pointer finger. Now, speaking of the pointer finger, we are now going to go in with that light blue outline. This is very similar to what I've been doing in a lot of my videos, actually. I've been doing this nail very frequently. I'm going to be using a long liner brush to outline this nail, and I'm trying my best to get it as close to the cuticle as possible. And this is, again, why I mentioned you really don't need that base layer to be all the way to the edges of this nail, because we're going to be covering it up anyways, and you really don't want the edges to be kind of thick, and that just kind of warps the shape, and we really don't want that. So we are now moving on to some of the last parts of the actual gel nail art. And for this pinky nail, I'm going to be doing some hibiscus flowers using some white gel polish. This is a fairly simple, straightforward process. I'm going to be creating a pentagon using some white dots. And then for each of those white dots, I'm adding 2 little ones on the sides. And once I've got the pentagon shape the way I wanted, I'm going to use a line art brush to pull in some of that white gel polish into the center. This part is supposed to be fairly feathered and very light, so don't go in with too much gel polish. You want these lines to be pretty thin so that you can get that textured, sort of striated effect. I've never used that word before, but like striated, if that makes sense. But yes, that is pretty much how I did these flowers. So now we're going to move on to some of this 3D work, and for today we're going to be doing the 3D swirl pattern on the French tips using some rhinestone glue. This is again another nail that I've been doing a lot this summer, and the more I do it, the more I enjoy actually applying the rhinestone glue onto the brush rather than applying the rhinestone glue directly onto the nail. I used to do this nail design by actually putting the rhinestone glue onto a palette and picking it up with my brush, but I do feel like actually applying it on the brush saves you from wasting a lot of the product and also allows you to get a more balanced and even looking surface, if that makes sense. Especially considering that you have more control over the bead sizes that you're using if it's coming directly from the tube. gonna go in with a couple of gold beads onto these nails. I'm going to be using a singular gold bead for the center of the flower nail, and of course just curing that down using some rhinestone glue. And I'm also going to get a couple of gold pearls onto the pinky nail. And to close off the 3D work, I'm going to be going in with some drops of rhinestone glue on the pointer finger. Now at this point, I totally forgot to do the detailing on the flower, so I'm going to take the same light blue gel polish and I'm going to create some dots on the edges of these flower petals. And to finish off these nails, I'm going to go in with a single layer of top coat. Specifically for this nail set, I really want to make sure that the top coat is as thin as I can get it, especially considering that I want the 3D pieces to really shine through. Of course, you could always go in with the rhinestone glue after you do the top coat, but I do feel a little bit more secure knowing that the rhinestone glue is wrapped in the top coat and that it doesn't end up popping off. So because of that, I always do my rhinestone glue first and then really wrap it in the top coat. But of course, making sure that it's as thin as I can get it. And before I cure, I always like to make sure to wipe down the sides. And I'm going to go in for a full 60 seconds. So these nails are all done and here's what they are looking like. And of course, I just went in with a couple of rings as I always do. And now to finish off this nail set, I'm going to go in with a little bit of cuticle oil. And that completes today's set. I really do hope you guys enjoyed this one. I really do love the simplicity of the color scheme and even the designs of this nail set. But again, that is definitely relative to my own standards. It's definitely refreshing to just do something that isn't too complicated and it's just really cute and simple. So of course, you guys let me know what you think of this one in the comments. I think that I might have 1 or 2 more summer nail sets up my sleeve, but I'm not exactly sure about that. At least 1 more though will definitely be coming before the end of August. And honestly, I am a little bit sad to see the end of summer coming so quickly. I feel like the summer was so short, like it just did not last that long, but I'm also very ready for some fall nails and just get into the cozy vibes, which is definitely where my heart lies. I am a cozy girl, so fall nails is definitely my favorite type of nails. But anyways, let's go ahead and put this nail set on a scale of 1 to 10. I would definitely give these a 9 out of 10. Not because the nail set isn't absolutely gorgeous, but I do think that my pointer finger could have been a little bit better. I think that my airbrushing was a little bit too intense and you can't really see too much of the yellow background underneath it, which is why I do want to specify that when you're doing that airbrush, you don't want to go too crazy because it doesn't really look as detailed as I wanted it to look, but even still, I love these nails. I love how simple they are, and I just really like how crispy they look. I think that's one of my favorite things about this nail set. I love the soft, the sweet, the cotton candy vibes that I get from this nail set. I just think it's very cute. But again, let me know what you guys think of this one down below. Let me know if you'd wear it for the end of the summer. But that is all that I have for you guys today. As always, I want to say thank you guys so much for tuning in today, and I will see you guys in the next one.